fasting.
Yeah.
How often do you do long-term fasts, like over like 3 days or more? And maybe that's not the amount of time you do it for. Basically, how often do you do them, and how many days do you do them for? And can you explain some of like the benefits, like, or the low-hanging fruit per se benefits to a human to practice these kind of fasts?
Yeah, for fasting. Well, I became interested in fasting because of the work that George Cahill did at Harvard Medical School, where he fasted subjects for 40 days. And this was published, and I kind of delved in and read everything I could. And that was sort of my introduction. This is probably going back to 2008, like reading this paper. And then a big review was written about him in 2006, which I was aware of, but didn't really read it thoroughly until 2008. Then it became apparent to me that once your body is, after about 3 days, I mean, your brain is basically, your body's just cranking on ketones. So, which is being released from your fat stores. So your fat gets into your blood, it goes to your liver. Your brain can't really use the fats for fuel, so it converts them to ketones. And there's a gradual shift from glucose to ketones. So I became very interested in doing it myself. And it was probably about 10 years ago, after reading this, that I decided to fast for 7 days. And I've never fasted that long since. But I have done a lot of 3-day fasts, especially when I'm traveling, if I'm by myself. My wife and I like to sit down to dinner every night and have that. So sometimes, I do the intermittent fasting, but I only typically when I'm by myself or doing some kind of experiment, will I do 3 or 4 days. And sometimes if I'm sick too, if I feel something coming on, I'll fast, and then I never get sick.
Really?
So I believe, fasting can rejuvenate the immune system. 70% or more of your immune system is kind of in your gut. And a lot of immune system energy is spent dealing with the stuff that we're eating, right? So especially if you have leaky gut. So you're eating food, and say your gut's not in the best health, right? The tight junctions that hold the epithelial cells together in your gut, if they become loose or whatever, you're letting small particles and things get into your bloodstream that otherwise would not be there. And your immune system has to work. They recognize these things as antigens. So your immune system is working hard to neutralize some of these antigens, right? When you're fasting, your immune system is like, it's like looking for something to do, right? So it's just like hanging out. So if you have a little bug or a virus or something, then it becomes more vigilant to basically deal with that. So that's how I think of it.
Okay.
But after I've been delving into like, how does fasting affect the immune system? So the way I envision it, and I'm not an immunologist, but it's very apparent that, food, it puts massive demands, especially if your gut health is not optimal on your immune. Even if you have optimal gut health and everything, a lot of time and energy is spent. A lot of immunological resources are spent dealing, with food. So fasting is a way to sort of regenerate the immune system. It stimulates things like autophagy, right? Which could be beneficial. Calorie restriction could sort of do the same thing, but fasting does it sort of in a hyperactivated state. So it can improve your metabolic health. It can lower, insulin, lower blood glucose, elevate ketones, which can be beneficial. Fasting can be a way of sort of just maintaining your calories, like through intermittent fasting. But long-term fasting really puts the body into a state of stress, and the hormetic response or adaptive response to that stress is where we get the benefits. You might not feel good when you're fasting. You might have a headache. You might feel crummy. But if people stick with it, after about the 3rd or 4th day, you start feeling almost normal. It's a little bit scary. And actually at the 7th day, I felt fine. I just felt my energies were kind of low. I felt a little bit cold. Like, the AC was too cold. Like my metabolism was shutting down, but I was still clear. I was writing grants, and actually the work that I did during that time, that grant ended up getting funded. And I think I got a couple manuscripts out during the week that I didn't eat anything, I had taught classes and stuff too.
Did I hear correctly that you deadlifted an absurd amount of weight after like a 7-day fast? Yeah,
that was on the 7th day. Yeah, I think I had taught in the morning, and I did some like fitness camp later in the day. And that night, I knew, I was like, well, let me work out. I had done some light workouts, just like chin ups and push ups throughout. Cause I do think it's important to do resistance training if you're fasting to help maintain muscle. But if you do something too strenuous, right, you're accelerating catabolic processes, and you don't want to necessarily do that. But I did find it very interesting as a litmus test for my strength. Deadlifts are a pretty good litmus test for that. And I was kind of cautious not to go too crazy because I didn't want to break form and get injured at the end of this. That would be like really bad. And people would like, don't. But as you're warming up, you have an idea of how much So it's like 135, 225, 315, and then 405 felt really easy. And then so I did like 5 plates and the collars and stuff. So it was about 500 pounds. And yeah, I did that for 10. I just kind of stopped at 10, and I didn't really feel. I didn't even get sore the next day or anything like that. But I can typically do more. But so I didn't push myself. So maybe I could do 585 at that time for about 10. So I did for 95 or 500 pounds. So I usually do like 6 plates for 10, but I did 5 plates for 10, and it was not hard. It was about how it normally feels.
Okay.
So that was kind of it. If I was to do it again, I would take something like creatine monohydrate. I would probably, that's like a supplement, that can help with training. I would probably take, I did take electrolytes, but I do plan to do it again. I just need to time it right. I feel like I'm ostracizing my wife. I'm not eating dinner or something like that. It's like more of a social thing. I think when I was doing it before, I would just like have tea, like green tea in the morning. I tried to cut back on my caffeine too.
Yeah. That's one of my question I really had for you, was during those long-term fasts, what do you have tea? Do you drink, what specific things do you consume?
Yeah. Beef bouillon cubes. I had those. I would just boil some water and throw one in that. And that was actually like pretty satiating. I would look forward to that. But I would have half of my normal cup of coffee because I didn't want to jack myself up on caffeine. But I didn't want to eliminate it because that was part of, I'm habituated to caffeine, whether you like it or not. I think we all are. We wake up and have our first cup of coffee to basically deal with the caffeine withdrawal side of it. Yeah. So when I first started training, I used caffeine like twice a week, and the effects were pretty big. But I didn't want to completely get off of it and then start caffeine again. So I just did less of it with green tea in the afternoon. But that's all I had. Minerals, electrolytes, some beef bouillon, and I felt fine. I think the third day was the hardest, but after that, it was pretty easy. And I encourage people to do it, especially if they have any kind of, hereditary predisposition for cancer, Alzheimer's disease, or type 2 diabetes, things like that.